It was the summer of 1981, and the air in Frisco City, Alabama, was thick with the sweet scent of pine and the chirping of cicadas. I was 16 then, and the world felt like it was brimming with possibility. My best friends, Alex and Jamie, were 16 and 17 respectively, and we had just finished our sophomore and junior years. We had been friends since childhood and shared a love for the great outdoors. Together, we hatched a plan to find Bigfoot near Baily's Creek. An adventure of a lifetime awaited us. One sweltering afternoon, Alex suggested we camp by the river. "Let's prove there's no Bigfoot once and for all," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Jamie and I agreed, more for the thrill of the adventure than any real belief in the creature. We packed our gear and piled into my old car, a 1964 Plymouth that was puke green and ugly, with an old push-button transmission gear selector. The sun was high in the sky, and our spirits were even higher as we set off down the dusty road to Baily's Creek. The drive to Baily's Creek was long and bumpy, the dirt road winding through the dense forest. We reached the riverbank by late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows through the trees. The river's gentle babble was a welcome sound, and we quickly set up our tent and gathered wood for a fire. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest came alive with the sounds of night. We sat around the fire, toasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Alex, always the bravest of us, started recounting the tales of Bigfoot sightings in the area. Jamie and I laughed nervously, our eyes darting to the dark woods beyond the fire's glow. The night felt thick with possibility, and a shiver ran down my spine. Around midnight, the fire began to die down, and we decided to turn in. The tent was cramped but cozy, and we lay there whispering and giggling until sleep took over. It must have been a few hours later when I woke up to a strange noise. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long, eerie shadows that danced with the wind. At first I thought it was just the wind rustling the leaves, but then I heard it again, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from deep within the forest. It was unlike any sound I had ever heard before, sending chills down my spine. I nudged Alex awake, and he listened, his face pale in the dim moonlight. His eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the sound. We both knew something was out there, something that didn't belong. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle seemed amplified in the stillness of the night. He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. We had heard stories about the creature that roamed these woods, but we never truly believed them, until now. Jamie stirred and sat up, his expression mirroring our fear. He had always been the brave one, but even he looked terrified. The three of us exchanged glances, knowing we were all thinking the same thing. We sat there in silence, straining to hear over the pounding of our hearts. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. Every second felt like an eternity. The growl came again, closer this time. It was followed by heavy footsteps, the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. The ground seemed to tremble with each step. The leaves rustled and branches snapped under its weight, creating an ominous symphony of sounds. Alex grabbed the flashlight and slowly unzipped the tent. The sound of the zipper seemed deafening in the silence. We held our breath, waiting for what we might see. He shone the beam into the darkness, and we all gasped. The light cut through the night, revealing shadows that seemed to move and shift. Our hearts raced as we tried to make sense of what we were seeing. There, just beyond the reach of the light, stood a massive figure. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen, its presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It was covered in dark, matted hair, its eyes glowing with an eerie, reflective light. The creature's gaze seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto us with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. The creature stood on two legs, towering over us, its broad shoulders and muscular frame unmistakable. It was a sight straight out of our worst nightmares, yet we couldn't look away. We were face to face with Bigfoot. The stories we had heard, the legends we had dismissed, all came rushing back in that moment. It was real, and it was right in front of us. For a moment, none of us moved. We were frozen in fear, our minds struggling to process what we were seeing. The forest around us seemed to fade away, leaving only us and the creature. The creature stared at us, its eyes filled with a strange intelligence. It was as if it was studying us, trying to understand who we were and why we were there. The connection was both unsettling and mesmerizing. Then, with a deep rumbling growl, it turned and vanished into the trees. The sound echoed through the forest, leaving us in stunned silence. The encounter had lasted only moments, but it felt like a lifetime. We sat there, stunned and silent, our hearts racing. The reality of what we had just witnessed slowly began to sink in. We had come face to face with a legend, and it had left us forever changed. Alex was the first to speak. His voice was shaky, barely above a whisper, as if he was afraid speaking too loudly might bring the creature back. "Did you see that?" he whispered. It was real. We all nodded, still trying to wrap our minds around the encounter. The forest around us seemed to come alive again, but we knew we would never see it the same way. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, casting long shadows and illuminating the forest floor with a golden hue, we hurriedly packed up our things, our hearts still racing from the night's events. We loaded the equipment into the car, our hands trembling slightly, and drove back to town as fast as we could, the forest slowly fading behind us. The car was filled with a heavy silence. We didn't talk much on the way, each of us lost in our thoughts, replaying the night's encounter over and over in our minds. Back in Frisco City, we tried to tell our story to anyone who would listen. We gathered around, recounting every detail, hoping someone would believe us. But most people just laughed it off, dismissing our tale as nothing more than a wild adventure. "Just kids' imagination," they said, shaking their heads with amused smiles. But we knew what we had seen. The fear in our eyes and the conviction in our voices told a different story. It wasn't a story or a trick of the light. Bigfoot was real, a towering figure that had emerged from the shadows, and it was out there, lurking in the woods near Baily's Creek. The memory of its presence would haunt us, a reminder of the mysteries that still lay hidden in the world. As the years went by, we drifted apart, life taking us in different directions. But every now and then, when the summer air is thick and the cicadas are singing, I think back to that night. I can still see those glowing eyes in the darkness, still hear that low growl. It was a night that changed us forever, a night that proved some legends are real, and though many years have passed, the memory remains as vivid as ever. One year later, after countless sleepless nights and endless speculation, I returned to the same area alone, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a need for closure. The forest was eerily quiet, and the sense of being watched was overwhelming. As night fell, the shadows seemed to grow longer, and the silence became almost deafening. I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching. This time, unlike before, I was prepared with a camera, determined to capture any evidence of the elusive creature. But what I experienced was beyond belief, something that would change my understanding of the natural world forever. The encounter was brief but intense, a fleeting moment that felt like an eternity. It left me with more questions than answers, a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. The legend of Bigfoot was no longer just a story, it was my reality. The tales I had heard as a child, the whispered rumors, all of it was now undeniably real. As I reviewed the footage, my hands trembled with anticipation. Chills ran down my spine as I watched the grainy images unfold. There, in the grainy footage, was a large, shadowy figure moving through the trees. The eyes, those same glowing eyes, stared directly into the camera before disappearing into the darkness. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered reality. Those eyes, filled with an intelligence and awareness, seemed to pierce through the screen, connecting with me on a primal level. I knew then that I had to share this with the world, to prove that the legend was real, that the stories were not just figments of imagination. The photo sparking debates and discussions around town. People weighed in, each with their own theories and beliefs. Some called it a hoax, dismissing it as a clever trick or digital manipulation, while others believed it was the definitive proof they had been searching for. For me, it was more than just proof. It was a vindication of our experience, a confirmation that what we saw that night was not a figment of our imagination. It was a moment of clarity, a realization that the world was far more mysterious than I had ever imagined. But with this newfound attention came a sense of responsibility. The forest, once a place of mystery and wonder, now felt like a battleground between believers and skeptics. The serene woods had become a stage for a larger conflict, a clash of ideologies and beliefs. And as I stood at the edge of Baily's Creek, camera in hand, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and uncertainty. I couldn't help but wonder if I had done the right thing. Had I brought light to a hidden truth, or had I disturbed something that was meant to remain hidden? The weight of my actions pressed heavily on my shoulders. Only time will tell if my decision was the right one, if the legend of Bigfoot was meant to be uncovered or left in the shadows. But one thing is certain. The legend of Bigfoot is no longer just a story. It is a part of my reality, a truth that I carry with me every day. It is a part of my reality, forever etched in the annals of Baily's Creek, a place where the line between myth and reality blurs. Baily's Creek will always be a place of mystery, a place where legends come to life and the unknown becomes known.